There have been a lot of people reporting email scams to me. We've talked about a few of them before on the show as they come up, but right now we've got a big warning out from our CISA, the national guys that are watching cybersecurity. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. Hopefully you got my newsletter on Monday or Wednesday this week. We've been sending it out twice just in case people miss it. Anybody who doesn't open it the first day, we will resend it because there's so much important stuff in there, and I appreciate it. We've got thousands and thousands. We're halfway to 10,000 people on our weekly email list, and the activity rates are crazy on it. We get about half of all of you guys open that email every week. That's just unheard of. So I know I'm helping you. And if you are not a subscriber, take a couple of minutes right now. This is my free email list. Yeah, I have things in my postscript about stuff that I offer, particularly for businesses, but this is for everyone. I really am trying to help make this world a bit of a better place by helping everybody understand what they should be doing. And that means you personally, you individually, because there's things in that email that are for individuals, they're for retirees, they're for small companies, all the way up through multinationals. And I've had every one of those as a client over the years. This week, I really focused in on an email, in my email, on this article from IdentityIQ.com. You can find a direct link to it by going online. And the author of this article is Kristen Austin. Very interesting stuff that she points out. This is from October 9th, this particular blog post, really. And she goes through in some detail what happens if your email address is stolen. So I'd like to start with something that I've really emphasized here over the years. There's a guy named Troy Hunt down in Australia, and he has been going on the dark web and collecting these massive troves of data that has been stolen. And he continues to do it. And now the federal government is helping him out a little bit by providing him with information, as are pretty much all of the major companies out there. And then he puts it all together into a free database. It's called Have I Been Pwned? PWNED.com. PWNED. I know it's a little odd, pwned. That goes way back to some of the earlier video games, but PWNED. And that means that your account, your password has been owned. That might be the easiest way to remember it, even though that's not really the derivation, but haveibeenpwned.com. This lets you check if your email account has been stolen in a breach, your phone number has been stolen in a breach, and it also describes details of the breach that it found your information in. It also lets you check passwords. So if I click here on haveibeenpwned.com on their homepage and click on passwords right at the very top, you should probably try and follow me along here. And let's use the password that was used by the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. I think it was the vice chair, or maybe it was the presidential guy. Anyways, I can't remember the guy's name now. But he used a password of P @ instead of A, he's so clever, SSW0RD. That is a password that he used. So if we put that in there, which I just did, it comes back and says, oh no, pwned. This password has been seen almost 74,000 times before, which means this password has been found probably in multiple breaches over the years here, frankly, and has been seen just 74,000 times, a lot of times. Of course, it could appear more than once. That's kind of bad, isn't it? How about let's try another one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, that's 5 million times it's been seen in stolen password databases. How about 09876544321? There you go. That's clever. Yeah. Oh, it's much more clever than 1 through 8. It has only been seen 500,000 times. We're looking at haveibeenpwned.com. I want you to go there online right now. Have, Havei, been, B-E-E-N, pwned. This is where it gets tricky. PWNED.com. So you can look at all of these passwords. It's warning you about password reuse and password stuffing, which is one of the things that we see, credential stuffing. And what happens with credential stuffing is that they are taking advantage of human nature. You know, you would be a pretty normal person if you were using the same credentials on multiple websites. So what are your credentials? Usually they are your email address and a password. And you know, it's hard to remember all of these passwords. I was speaking with a gentleman named Bob this week about his usage of passwords, and he took my advice. He's been using 1Password. I don't want you to get confused and think Craig's telling me just use the same password everywhere. There is a website called 1Password.com. You can get their software. I use it myself. We use it for our business. We have clients that use it as well. There's a free version, there's paid versions, but it is a password manager. And that password manager helps you remember multiple passwords. I have over 3,000 entries in my 1Password database. That's a lot, isn't it? And I can and I do generate a unique password every time I go online, because credential stuffing is where they take these breached accounts and put them all together and then try and breach other potential accounts. So I'm going to read here just a real short thing from Troy Hunt's website, troyhunt.com. He's the guy that runs Have I Been Pwned. I'm loading over 1 billion breached accounts into Have I Been Pwned. These are from 2 different combo lists, which are collections of email addresses and passwords from all sorts of different locations. I verified their accuracy, including my own record in one of them, and many hundreds of millions of the email addresses are not already in Have I Been Pwned. Because of the nature of the data coming from different places, if you're in there, then treat it as a reminder that your data is out there circulating around you and that you need to go and get yourself a password manager and create strong, unique passwords. Now, there's a lot more information you can go to there, but I want to also point out the whole idea behind the password managers is really to give unique passwords, so they can't do credential stuffing. So if you have, for instance, an email address of dnc@gmail.com, and you have a password of P@SSW0RD, we know now how to get into your Google account. Now, how do you get that password? How did they get that password? It's often through social engineering, but it can also be because a website was breached and the database was stolen from that website. But now we know how to get into that Gmail account, let's say. So next step is, how about let's look at that email. So you go and the bad guys look in that email account and they say, oh, here's a statement from Bank of America. Oh, here's one from TD Bank. So then what they do is they go to those banks. They try and log in with dnc@gmail.com. And they try and use the wonderful password that they already have for his Gmail account. And then what happens? Well, they're in, right? They're in. Because the person used the same password, the same username or email address on both sites. But even if there is a different password over there at the bank, what do? Well, they hit recover password or forgot password. And then they put in the email address, dnc@gmail.com, and the bank sends off a password reset link to where? Where's it send it? Yeah, it sends it to dnc@gmail.com. And who has access to dnc@gmail.com? The bad guys. So now they have it, they are in, and they can do pretty much whatever they want with your bank account information. That's why it's so important. And then they'll also do just generic credential stuffing, depending on the website and the kind of anti-software that it has built into it. So what they do then with the email stuffing, is they just try all kinds of usernames and passwords that they've stolen. And there are a lot of them. So back to haveibeenpwned.com, I'm going to put in my email address of Craig at craigpeterson.com. Oh, no pwned. So it's telling me that my email address, at the very least, is being found in 6 data breaches. So there's one is telling me from 2019 or 2018, and it tells you what was stolen. Email addresses, employers, geographic locations, job titles, names, phone numbers, salutations, social media profiles. What that is telling you now is the bad guys have enough information to try and con me into doing something I shouldn't do because they know my job title, they know where I am, they know my phone number. Do you see where we're going with all of this stuff? And others as well. There's a whole bunch. The most recent for mine was in December 2020. NetGalley. All right. We're going to talk more about this. We got a lot more to cover. This is a great article, and this is all information we all need to know and understand like the back of our hands. We've just been talking about credential stuffing and have I been pwned. Make sure you listen to that if you haven't already. You'll find it on my podcast at craigpeterson.com. This is really important stuff, and we're talking about an article in Identity IQ. So they've stolen our email address. They've got our password. They know the password works because they tried it on at least one website. Whether this is your personal email address or your work email address, there are lots of bad things the scammers can do. We talked about scammers, hackers could go into your bank account and do whatever they wanted with any money that's in there, right? Which is scary. No question about that one. Not that there's much money in my account, but anyhow. There are other people who are using your email address and your email account to send out emails to other potential victims. So they are buying your information from data brokers. They might be getting them from the dark web. They might be email harvesting, scraping websites, social engineering. There's a lot of stuff they could be doing. One of my clients this week sent me an email because they had received a phishing email, obviously not from the person that they thought it was from, right? That it was supposedly from, but it is a problem. Phishing, right? So I looked it up a little bit more and found out that as of right now, about 20% of all phishing emails are making it through Microsoft Exchange servers, including Microsoft 365. Now, phishing is a real problem, and with this particular client, they sent it to me because it's so rare they actually see a phishing email, because we don't just use the Exchange filters. We have some advanced email filters that we have from Cisco that allow us to do some really great stuff in blocking almost all of them. So I sent them to a website I'd like you guys to go to right now. And that is a website that's free. It's put up by our friends at Google. And the URL, here, we'll give it to you right now. I want you guys to open your browser. This works on a desktop. It works on a tablet or a phone. It's Phishing Quiz. Phishing is spelled PH. This type of phishing. PHISHING. Quiz, all one word, Phishing Quiz. With Google, all one word, with WITHGOOGLE.com. phishingquiz.withgoogle.com. You can go there and put some information. Now, it doesn't keep it. It's just going to make a fake. You can use a fake name, fake email address. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to do it right now. So my name I'm going to say is John. My email is going to be john@johnemail.com. And then I'm going to click Get Started. So hopefully you're following along with me. phishingquiz.withgoogle.com. So it says, let's start with this Google Doc email. Be sure to check out link URLs by hovering or using long presses and explore the addresses. Don't worry, none of the links work. We don't want you to send you anywhere funny. So this is showing an email from luke.jason8000@gmail.com. It says Luke Johnson has shared a link to the following document, 2022 Department Budget.doc. Hey there, here's the doc you asked me for. Let me know if you need anything else. So if you hover over it, and I'm using Chrome right now because I'm assuming that's what most of you guys are using, you'll see that it is pointing to drive-google.com/luke.johnson. If you click on that, it actually doesn't do anything, okay? But it could potentially. So it's saying, well, is this legitimate or not? Well, I'm looking at this and I see a couple of problems with it right off the bat. The first one is the URL, when you mouse over that department budget document, is http://. So instead of HTTPS, it's HTTP. That means it's not using a security certificate. The second thing I see is it isn't drive.google.com, it's drive-google.com. Interesting. Now up at the top of the screen, right above this email, it has two buttons, phishing or legitimate. So I'm going to hit legitimate because I'd like to see what they have to say. It says, this is actually a phishing email. The URL looks correct, but is actually a lookalike. Be cautious about hyperlinks and attachments that you open from emails. They may direct you to fraudulent websites. So if you click on Show Me now, it is telling you. It's a little pop over, says mousing over the link or using a long press shows you that it goes to the insecure imitation domain drive-google.com. You click on Next, and it takes you to the next one. So I'd like you guys to spend a few minutes running through this. Give this URL to your family, give it to your friends, take it to work, because it's really important. This next example is a fax. It says fax message no reply admin, and it's from no reply at efax.com. And yet the logo in this email is EFAX, not FACKS. That smells kind of fishy to me. Now it says you have received a one-page fax at, and it gives you the date. It's today's date and today's time. So if you mouse over, click here to view this fax online. Have a look. This is interesting because, again, the URL has HTTP at the beginning instead of HTTPS, which means it's not using a secure certificate. And it is pointing to efax.hosting.com.mailru382.co. Wow, that tells you something here. Well, first of all, it's a Colorado URL. MailRU makes me think it might be Russia, but the big giveaway is efax.hosting.com is the first part of this URL, which means it's not sending you to efax. And then it's got efax delivery, blah, blah, blah. So if you were to click on this, this one has a unique URL. At the very end of it, you can see it has this 2017 DK4H, blah, blah. Bunch of random looking numbers and digits, or letters and digits. That is then used to track you. So they know they were able to con you into clicking on that link in the email. Is that a problem or what? Okay, that is a problem. No question about it. Now, they also have another little button. If you look at that email, again, we're at phishingquiz.withgoogle.com. You'll see it says to me, and it has a little pull down button right next to it. So if you click on that, it shows you that it's from the same thing was showing us before, no reply at efacks.com. And who it's to, the date, and the subject. Okay, so that all looks legit. So what do you think? Is this legit or not? I think I've kind of shown that it's a phishing email, right? So click on phishing and correct. So they have multiples of these available right there, all free, all private, and it really helps you to know a phishing email, what the easiest ways are to tell if it's a phishing email. And then what do you do if you get one? Well, report it. Report it to your IT people or report it to your cybersecurity people, depending on who you are in the organization you're in, or if it's just you, well, you probably don't want to report it because no one's going to listen. These days are crazy. We've been talking about your email passwords, and account compromises. We're going to get to what you can do if it's happened to you. But first, and right now, we're going to talk about signs that your email account has been hacked. Now, I get calls from people when they're having these problems. I get emails, just me at craigpeterson.com. I'm always glad to help out, right? I don't charge. My wife keeps getting after me for that, but I really want to help you guys, right? And hopefully there's businesses out there that'll keep me busy and can make some money off of them. But let's talk about some signs that your email account has been hacked, because this is going to tell you that you need to immediately take some action. Number one, you can't log into your account. Now, this happens frequently. It's happened to me many, many times, and I'm therefore sure it's happened to you as well. But if you can't log into your account, it can be a bunch of things. Me, it's usually my fat fingers, right? In other words, I mistyped it. That's the colloquialism for mistyping is fat fingers. And I just, I get something wrong. I got some special characters in it. Much of the time nowadays, I'm not typing in a password at all, because I'm using a password manager. But when a hacker gains access to your account, when they've got your username, which is usually your email address, and they've got your password, the first thing they can do is change your password. And many of them do that. And we're talking about your email account here, because that is kind of the golden ring that they can grab, and once they've got it, as we explained, they can use it to get access to pretty much everything, including your bank accounts if you haven't done things right. So they will change your password, and that's going to restrict your access to your account. This happened to a friend of mine, a very good friend, and he ended up losing a bunch of money because of that. But he couldn't log into his account and just chalked it up to, I'm getting older, I probably forgot what my password was, and that wasn't the case. So if you can't log into your account, the chances are that the hacker has locked you out of your own account. Different websites, different email sites have different policies for what they can and will do for you if your account is taken over. Many of them, unfortunately, put a time delay on it. They say, we'll set it to a new password for you in 30 days. And that's what happened to my friend. They told him, this was Hotmail. They said, in 30 days, we'll change it for you. Hotmail, of course, is a Microsoft product and is not one you should actually be using anymore. And I've told him that again and again. And so we set him up with a Google account because he didn't want a paid account and he didn't want to mess around with encrypted stuff. And so we set him up with a Google account. And sure enough, 30 days later, I'm getting emails from him from his Hotmail account because he's just switched back to it. I don't know. It's a little annoying. So he'll be calling me again, I'm sure, about an account takeover. So number one reason that you should be worried that your account has been taken over is you can't log into your account. Number two, you start getting strange messages popping up on your social media accounts. This is from an article in Identity IQ here that we're kind of running through their main points. So if you've been posting on social media, we're talking about things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and if your recent account or posts in those accounts are showing products that you have never clicked on before, it's showing you things that you haven't searched for. Someone might have gained access to your email address and your social media accounts, because we know that advertisers are paying really good money to know what you are looking for. So you start seeing strange things popping up, someone else might be using your social media account. Number 3, your family members or friends are receiving emails that you did not send. This is an oldie but a goodie. We've been seeing this one for, 2-3 decades now, frankly. And it's a dead sign, absolute sign that your account, your email account has been compromised. Because you get notes from friends saying, hey, did you send me this? Why did I get this from you? In those cases, back in the old days, what they would do is they would take over your account, your email account, download all of the email addresses, or at the very least, send a phishing email out to everybody that's in your contacts. And it looks like it's coming from you, doesn't it? Because it is actually your account. We had this happen with a business client of ours who said, hey, well, wait a minute, why did we get this email? And it turned out one of the vendors of theirs, the people that they buy some of the parts from that they use to assemble their own products. One of their vendors said, "Hey, you need to send me this money because it's overdue, etc." And it wasn't legit. They said, "Hey, this isn't a good legitimate invoice." So they called up the vendor, and sure enough, the vendor said, "Yeah, that wasn't us." And then I looked at the email headers, and we delved into it pretty extensively. And what we found at that point was, the bad guys really were messing around with this. And they had taken over the email account for the financial person, for the accountant, for the business. And so they were sending out invoices that had paid to accounts where they were expecting the money to be transferred, ACH'd, that was of the hackers. So people were paying invoices, and in fact, the invoices were going to the hackers. That's a similar thing to what happened to the Shark Tank lady, Barbara Corcoran, where they got an invoice for, I think it was $400,000, and her accounting people went ahead and paid it, but it wasn't legitimate. They caught it in time. Man, you only have seconds sometimes. They caught it in time, and none of that money was transferred. So if you're getting email from a business that you're not expecting, make sure you contact them. Call them up on the phone, because it might be completely illegitimate. Same thing with friends. Call them up on the phone. Say, hey, you didn't send that? Okay, well, I'm thinking your email account got hacked. And it's their email account that got hacked, not yours, because it's coming from their email account. Your sent message folder has these spammy messages that you did not write, okay? Now, maybe you were, drunk emailing, but that's something kids are more likely to do. But if your sent folder has messages in it that you did not send, or here's another sign, your sent mail folder is empty, then what'll happen is they will send all these emails out, and then they'll go into the sent folder and just delete everything. It's much easier than selectively deleting the ones they sent. So if your email sent folder shows there is nothing in it, or if there are emails in it that you definitely did not write, your email account may well have been hacked. And remember, there are a lot of things that scammers can do once they have control of your email account. We talked about how they can impersonate you, which is a real problem. They can use it to send phishing emails to get other people to do things that they want that person to do. And the scammers can access your online accounts because for most of us, everything revolves around and goes right back to our main email account. I have multiple accounts. When I sign up for things, I use what's called plus addressing, which lets me know when an email comes from, let's say, Apple. I know it's an email from Apple just by the address that they're sending it to. Because, in fact, I have hundreds of virtual email addresses, which is a different thing and something Apple is now offering for free. Anyways, stick around. We're going to talk about how to protect your email address and then how to recover your email account if you've been nailed by a scammer. If you missed part of today's show, email me at Craig Peterson Online and I can send you to the podcast. We are talking about your email account takeover, if it's been hacked, and we've covered a lot of stuff already today. But I'm going to go in now into how to protect your email address and what to do if it's already been stolen. Well, how to protect your email address, it's something that I've talked about before. I know we have a lot of new listeners. We always do, that are coming in and trying to figure out what's going on and how can they deal with things, right? And it's absolutely amazing when you really get down to it. How can you? What should you do? So here are the things that you can and should do if you haven't already. First of all, you need to use robust passwords. Now, for years, the recommendation was, well, have random character passwords, right? So it used to be restricted like 8 characters, and so you'd have upper, lowercase, special characters, and digits, and just all kinds of weird stuff in order to make that 8-character password good. Well, I hate to break it to some of you guys, but that 8-character password, I don't care how random it is, can be broken in a matter of a few hours at most. They're not any good anymore. You need to have a 20-character or longer password. Now, I know you're rolling your eyes. Okay, I get it. 20 characters is a lot of password, no question about it. But instead of thinking about passwords the way we used to, think about them the way they are now, the way they do work now. And that is to use a passphrase. A passphrase is where you have multiple words strung together. And so you put a special character in between the words or a number, upper or lowercase, whatever it might be. So an example of a passphrase would be 3 or 4 words. I've been using 4 words lately that don't necessarily go together. Some people might use a password like 70 years. Well, you don't want to use that one. It's just a little too common of a passphrase. But if you did something like even email inbox update, you put those words together and put some special characters between them. That's an easy one to remember. Even email inbox update, right? And I can guarantee you that password is not in use. Now, let me see. Am I fibbing here? Let me have a look. How do we look? I go to haveibeenpwned.com and we click on passwords, and then we go ahead and type it in. Even email inbox update. It is not found online, so go ahead and use that one. It's a good one. But that's the process you should be going through when you're setting up a password. Now, there is another process you can go through, which is to use a good password manager. Apple now has it built right into Safari, which is the web browser, and they have it built into the operating system as well to remember some of these passwords and to generate them. You know already, I use onepassword.com. Their software, they just had a major release of 1Password that I think did a great job. It's terrible to migrate to the latest one, but it's good to start with. So something like onepassword.com can generate strong passwords for you, and you don't even have to remember them. So that's the definition of a robust password in the 2020s. You need to also set up multi-factor authentication. Most of the time on websites, when you're talking about multi-factor authentication, it's your username. Now, unfortunately, most websites don't give you the choice of a username. You have to use your email address. I do not like that, but okay. So most of the time to log in, you need your email address or username and your password. Multi-factor authentication adds one more step to this, and that is something you have. The best kind of multi-factor authentication, well, you could argue a lot of things, but it certainly is not a text message. However, that's what most websites provide you with for multi-factor or two-factor authentication. We use for our stuff. Now, remember, I'm a managed security services provider. That's my company. So we have information about our clients. So we are, as one of these managed services providers, one of the key targets for hackers. Because if they can get into our systems, they can now get information about our clients, and in some cases maybe even get into our clients' systems. So we actually isolate our systems from the clients, and we do all kinds of stuff to help protect it. But one of the things we do is when we're logging in to our systems, we need a username, we need a password, and then we have an app that pops up on our smartphone. And the app says, are you trying to log into this software or this website? And you say yes. And then what it does is it looks for biometric information. So it actually does a face scan of us, of whoever's trying to log in, so that we are trying to keep our stuff very safe. The only way to log in is to have a username, to have a password, obviously be able to get to that piece of software in the first place, and then have a second password and username, and then have it go to my smartphone, my individual smartphone, where I say yes, and then my smartphone scans my face to make sure it's me. That is multi-factor authentication. Just sending you a text message is better than nothing, okay? Don't get me wrong. But just sending you a text message as part of two-factor or multi-factor authentication is not going to cut it, because that text message could potentially be intercepted. Now, I want to add one more thing onto this. It isn't that it just might be intercepted, because that's a little hard for them to do, but entirely plausible for them to be able to grab your text messages. And we won't get into that now, how that's done. But the other thing that these guys are doing is they are trying to log into your account, and the website sends you a text message, and then they reach out to you and ask you for what the code was. Now, they play all kinds of games to do that, because if they just said, hey, I'm Joe, I need that message, that number that I just texted you, right? They are very, very clever. And they pretend they're IT support. They pretend all kinds of things. And people give them that information. And that lets them in, right? Account takeover. But by doing what we do in order to protect our customers' information, that's literally impossible for it to happen. So you got to consider all of these things. But enabling multi-factor authentication is very important. Make sure you're updating your device's software, all of it, particularly the security software. And that's why I'm doing this patching thing. You might have noticed in the emails, I've got this patching thing going on. I think it's really, really important, because the people that have responded to the survey, and I really wish you would take a minute and respond. It's actually 90 seconds. I'd love to hear from you. But the people that have responded so far are saying that they're relying on the Apple updates and the Microsoft updates to keep them safe. And unfortunately, that's not even close to being enough, because the updates in both cases just update the operating system, not the other software you have. And then you really should enable some form of dark web monitoring, so that you know if your account has been compromised in some way in the dark web. And I did that for people here a few years ago, and I think we were charging $100 a year. We did it for 1 year. It was just so much work on our part to do it, and we had a bunch of people sign up, but you know how that is, attrition, people dropped off and everything. But anyhow, so let's talk about how to help recover your email account from a scammer. So number one, if you can still access your account, make sure you change your login credentials immediately. Some of these websites, when you set up multi-factor authentication, have as part of that a list of 8 or 10 numbers or 6-digit numbers that you can download when you set it up. So don't lose that. I put those into my password manager as a note on the account. So many times you can use one of those numbers, those 6-digit numbers that were set up for you way back when, to log in even if you don't have the right password. So that'll get you around the bad guy that has stolen your account, pretty simply. Number two, let your friends, family members, business acquaintances know about the hack so that they don't fall for the scams that are sent by the hackers. Because people trust us, right? You and me, we know more about computers than some other people around us. Obviously, not every one of you guys knows as much as somebody else, right? There's always a bigger fish. But make sure that you let all of these people know, because some of them are really relying on you. Contact your banks, any sort of credit cards that you have, store cards, etc. If you have any financial information in your inbox, again, that goes back to the multi-factor authentication. Are you using your email address that might be compromised in order to be able to recover your bank information? I really advise people to use a separate bank account, email address for their bank account entirely. Certainly what I do. You might want to reach out to an identity and credit monitoring service to help protect you. The service can give you real-time fraud and social security number alerts, dark web, internet monitoring, even identity theft insurance, and there's various types of protection plans that are available, and some of them are quite affordable. You know, this article I was going through is from Identity IQ, and they do have plans. I never used any of these plans. I'm not sure, but some of these companies can be helpful, but really what you need to do is monitor your credit report, look for any changes. It's free now with at most banks, and pretty much I can't think of any exception as far as credit card companies go, and you can see when there's a problem. Hey, make sure you get my newsletter. All of this was in this week's newsletter. Go to craigpeterson.com/subscribe, or just email me, me@craigpeterson.com, and I can send it all to you. Well, they did it. No longer called Build Back Better, but another part of this is called the CHIPS Act. And government's coming for our wallets again, and it's going to make things worse. Yeah, for chips. The semiconductor industry has been hit hard by the lockdown. Of course, it just totally destroyed supply chains all over the world. Makes me wonder if this wasn't intentional, but we are dependent on not just U.S. manufacturers for things like our cars, through our computers, through harvesting machines that farmers need. We are dependent on foreign nations to make our chips, our chipsets. That's kind of a bad thing when you consider right now there is a whole lot of stuff going on over there in the South China Sea, which of course is where what is made? You've probably heard about this before, where in fact most of our chips are made, at least the higher tech chips. That's a bad thing. because that means that a place like Taiwan, which has had serious problems with water shortages, and you need a lot of water in order to make chips, it has had all kinds of political instability. Of course, they had the same lockdown messes that the rest of the world had, and that just really messed them up. And then you look at what we did. You had the companies like Ford and GM. I'm mentioning these guys because they're the obvious ones, right? Chrysler, who all said, oh, people aren't going to buy cars, so we're going to cut back our orders. And remember the whole just-in-time thing? Back in the 70s, I remember this ever so well. It was like, wow, Japan, they are the model of world economies. We've got to copy everything that they do over there in Japan. And the big thing that we took from that was just-in-time inventory. Oh my gosh, I mean, I don't have to have a warehouse with parts and order a train load at a time. I can just order as many as I need and have them arrive just in time. I was watching a documentary on Volkswagen, who has, I guess it's the biggest factory in the world. This thing's absolutely amazing. And while they're assembling the cars, the parts that are needed show up just in time. There will be parts that show up that morning from subcontractors, and then they move through their systems there at the factory, and then they end up right there at the person who needs to install it minutes before it's needed. Now, that's kind of cool because it cuts down on your costs. It lets you change a vendor if you need to change a vendor. If you don't like some parts, you don't have to, get rid of a whole train load or return them all. You just have to return that days. But it introduces some very serious problems, especially when there are supply chain problems. We've been living in a world that has just been very, very easy. I'm not going to say it's too easy, but it's been very easy. We don't have so many of the problems that we used to have way back when, like, 50 years ago, really? We have these problems where we do a lockdown, where a country locks down. Let's say Taiwan locked down and we didn't, and we tried to manufacture things. You wouldn't be able to. And part of the theory behind the way we interact with other countries is that it will prevent war. You see, if we're a completely separate country and we decide that, just leave us alone, and let's say China decided that they wanted some of our territories or some of their neighbors over there in the South China Sea, etc., China could just go in and do it. But if we're trading partners, if they rely on us in order to keep their economy going, then we're not going to go to war with them, and they're not going to go to war with us because we both need each other. That's been a mantra now for quite a few decades with countries worldwide. Of course, Ukraine and Russia are an interesting combination because Russia needs Ukraine for quite a number of different supplies, food and other things. And Ukraine needs, to a lesser extent, Russia as well as a market. But it provides food for a worldwide market. It's kind of crazy. But that's been the theory. The theory is, well, let's bring everyone close together. We'll put our hands together. We'll lock them and we'll sing, I want the world to buy a Coke, right? Or whatever that song was. You'll probably remember that song, everyone standing around in the circles or all the way around the world. Now, it's a nice theory, and I like it. I like the fact we haven't gone to war, even though we've got I guess you could definitely call it a European war going on. But in fact, it does cause these types of problems we're seeing. We copied the Japanese just-in-time inventory, and that messed things up because those parts are not arriving when they're supposed to be arriving, and you no longer have a warehouse full of parts. So now you just can't do anything, right? Now you're in really ultimately big trouble. So what's happening now is Congress decided to pass I think they're calling it, a Deficit Reduction Act or something instead of Build Back Better. because, inflation, that's what it was. Yeah, this is going to get rid of inflation because we're increasing taxes. And I don't get it. Why would Congress think that increasing taxes would bring more money into their coffers? Every time it's been done, yeah, there's a little bit of a bump initially, but then it drops off dramatically. If you want to increase revenue to the federal government, you lower taxes. Every time that's been tried, pretty much, it's absolutely worked by lowering taxes, because now people aren't trying to hide the money. They aren't doing things like moving their businesses out of the country. Even Canada and the rest of Europe has lower corporate tax rates, and that's part of what they're going for. But the manipulation that appears to have happened here is that they wanted to pass this CHIPS Act. And the CHIPS Act is another example of the federal government helping special interest groups at the expense of you and I, the expense of the taxpayers. So this special interest group came to them and they carved out some 50-something billion dollars. I think it was, $52 billion in grants and $24 billion in tax credits to the U.S. semiconductor industry. Now, at first glance, you look at that and say, well, okay, that's actually really good, because what can happen here is the semiconductor industry can use that money to build plants here in the U.S., to build fabs, chip fabrication plants. I know I can talk. And yeah, they probably could, and that could be a very, very good thing. But the devil is in the details. Yes, what else is new here, right? So this last-minute bipartisan agreement that they agreed they weren't going to do Build Back Better because of what Manchin had said, right? I'm not going to support that because it's just going to increase inflation and increase our debt. And by the way, our federal government income is barely going to be enough to just cover the interest payments on the debt. No principal at all, which is an incentive for the federal government to cause inflation, because then the federal government can pay back that debt with inflated dollars that cost them less, and then there goes the debt, right? And they can talk about how great it was. But if you're retired, if you're looking at your retirement accounts, with the type of inflation we have, which isn't the 9 point whatever that they've claimed. In reality, if you use the same methods and metrics that were used in the 1980s, where they're saying, oh, it's been 50 years, 40 years since we had this type of inflation. No. We have never, ever had this type of inflation in modern America, ever. Because, in fact, the inflation rate, if you use, again, those same net metrics, is supposedly in the 20% range. So what that means is the federal government's able to pay you back 20% less than they actually borrowed from you because of that inflation. It's just incredible. So here we go. Some $77 billion going to the U.S. semiconductor industry. But, there's another little trick here that they played on all of us. And that is the lobbyists from the semiconductor industry, who, by the way, themselves are spending tens of billions of dollars to build new fabs, new plants. They're spending it out of their own pockets, not out of our pockets already, okay? But they lobbied, and Chuck Schumer introduced a cute little thing. The bill had said, yeah, we have to use this money for American interest, basically. So he removed that. So now, yeah, those tax dollars that are supposed to rebuild our chip industry, they can be used to help China. Yes, indeed. They have already penciled in some of that $77-ish billion to go to China. Yeah, isn't that great? I thought China was part of what we're trying to protect ourselves from here. Certainly not as a hot war sort of a thing, but frankly as our biggest competitor in the world. It is incredible. The U.S. share of chip manufacturing globally has dropped from 12% from 37% just 30 years ago. Okay, so we've lost 2/3 of our prowess, if you will, on the world market in making chips. Hey, you should have received this on, when was it this week? Wednesday, Tuesday. My weekly insider show notes. There's links to a great article in here from the semiconductor industry themselves talking about what is going on, what really happened. And don't worry, it's only more than $1 trillion. And then this on top of it, it's only another $250 billion. Don't worry about it. You'll be able to pay it back. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of digital exhaust. It's kind of a new term, and it's talking about the things we leave behind. The cookie crumbs, if you will. Not cookies and browsers, but that's part of it. We're going to talk about the browser you're using and the search engine. We have a lot of choices when it comes to browsers. We've talked about it before, and if you'd like a copy of my browser special report, of course, it's free. I wouldn't mention it if it wasn't here. And you can just get it by emailing me, me@craigpeterson.com. You actually can't just get it, but I'll be glad to email it to you, or we'll have Mary or Karen send it on off to you. me@craigpeterson.com. Well, people have been worried about their data. Many of us have been worried a very long time. And then remember the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal? You know, it's amazing to me how stuff gets politicized. I'm shaking my head. I just can't believe people. Because Barack Obama got everything on everyone on Facebook for his campaign. Not a beep. Nothing. Nothing. He had everything on everybody. And Cambridge Analytica, and it was just given to him, by the way. And then Cambridge Analytica decided, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make this little program. People can play it. We will advertise on Facebook, and then we'll gather data on people who are there on Facebook, and we'll use it for Orange Man Bad. Trump. Yeah, this will be great. And so the exact opposite of what they did with President Obama when he got all this information on tens of millions, I think it was actually hundreds of millions of people, they decided this was bad. And they started making a big deal about it. And so a lot of people at that point decided, hey, what's happening here? What is going on? Would they have my information? Because remember, this is an old adage. You've heard it a million times by now, but it bears repeating. If you're not paying for something, you or your information are the product. And that's exactly true. Exactly true. If you're using Google Maps, for instance, to get around, to do your GPS navigation, you are the product. Because Google is selling information. They collect information, right? That's what they do. And you might have noticed recently, you probably got an email from Google saying, we're going to be flushing your location, or at least some of your location information soon. Did you get that email from Google? I got it, right? And I don't use Google very much, but I obviously I need to. I need to know about Google. Google's good for certain things, and I understand what it's doing. But it decided all of a sudden after the, again, left stuff, right? People were all worried that because there was no longer a national law on abortion. By the way, there never has been a national law on abortion. And in fact, that's what the Supreme Court said. You can't make up a law in the court. You can rule on the application of the law in the court. They've stepped over that boundary and decided they can rule on whether or not there should be a law. And so the court said, hey, listen, this is at this point, a states' rights issue, right? The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The state should decide this. And the Congress didn't act. There's no federal law about this. So these rulings were bad. And people say, oh, no, that's terrible. It's the first time it's ever happened. No, there have been over 200 times where the Supreme Court changed its mind. Think of the Dred Scott decision. If you even know what that is, well, you guys do because you're the best and brightest. But these people complaining probably have no clue about any of this stuff, right? None at all. So they're all upset because now, oh my gosh, my golly. Because Roe v. Wade, etc., was overturned, now they're going to be tracking me because my data is being sold. Because remember, that's how they came after these January 6 protesters, right? That were down in Washington, D.C. by using the GPS data that came from the apps that were there on their phones. Yeah, and that's also how it was proven that the election may have been stolen, but certainly had substantial fraud because they were able to buy the data, look at the data, show what was pretty obviously the acts of at least 1,000 people that were completely illegal in ballot harvesting and ballot box stuffing. Right? So again, GPS data, you can buy it. The federal government's not allowed to keep data on us. It's not allowed to spy on the citizens at all, right? So what do? They go to these same data brokers and they buy the data. So now, well, we're not tracking the people. Are you kidding me? We would never do that. But they're buying the tracking data from third parties. So they are tracking. Oh, no, it's not us. It's other people. So now they're worried, well, if I go to an abortion clinic, are the state's attorneys general that do not allow abortions in their states where the law does not allow it, are they going to buy data and see that I went to an abortion clinic, even if I went to an abortion clinic out of state? Now, you can see their concern on that one, right? So again, now all of a sudden they're worried about tracking data. I just don't understand why they trust the government on one hand and don't trust it on another hand. I guess that's what people say, right? The ability to hold two conflicting thoughts as truth in your mind at the same time. But they're concerned and it's legitimate. So what happens? Google decides we're not going to keep location data on you, and that way none of the attorneys general can ask us for it or subpoena it because we just don't have it. And that was all because of the overturn of the court ruling on abortion, the federal court. So to me, it's just so disingenuous for these people to only care about privacy when it's about them. And I just don't understand it. My mother is that same way. I know she doesn't listen to this, so I can say that. But it's absolutely incredible to me that happens. So what do you use? There's a number of major search engines in the world. Really, what you're looking at is Google. It's like the 800-pound gorilla out there. And then you also have Bing, Microsoft search engine. There have been a few that have come and gone. There's some that I liked better. Like I loved Alta Vista much better. Because it had Boolean algebra operations that you could do much better than Google. So I've ended up with Devon Think that I use now for searching if I need to get real fancy searches going on. But I got to mention DuckDuckGo. Now, it got a bit of a black eye recently, but the reality is if you want to keep your searches private, DuckDuckGo is the way to go. Well, we talked about the top 100 hospitals in the country and how they were tracking you using Facebook or Google trackers, cookies. And they would know, oh, you just registered an appointment with an oncologist or whatever it might be, right? Which is private information. DuckDuckGo does not have any trackers on it. They do not keep a history of what you've been searching for, and they do not sell that stuff to advertisers. Now, behind DuckDuckGo is Bing, but Bing does not get access to you only DuckDuckGo does, and they don't keep any of that. So check it out online. That kids game we used to play, DuckDuckGo.com. Obviously, I don't make any money off of that. Oh, and by the way, they have apps for Android and iOS and browser extensions. Stick around. We'll be right back, and visit me online, CraigPeterson.com. I got a question from a parent whose son was serving over in the Middle East, and they were asking what was a safe messaging app to use, and they asked about WhatsApp. So we're going to talk about that right now. There are a lot of different messaging apps that people are using, and they all have different features, right? They have different ways of doing things. And the top are WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. Why would anyone use that? WeChat, again, why would anyone use that? Viber, Line, Telegram, and IMO, which I'm not familiar with. This is according to Inc. magazine, the top 7 messenger apps in the world. So why would people use those? Okay, so let's just talk about them very briefly. The 2 top ones in my mind that I want to talk about. But WhatsApp has 2 billion active users. It's the number 1 messaging app, followed by WeChat, which is a Chinese messaging app with 1.2 billion users. And WeChat is also used to make payments, and they've got this whole social credit system in China where they are tracking you, deciding whether or not you posted something or said something in a chat that they don't like, and so you can't get on the train to get to work, and you lose your job, right? Yeah, they do that regularly, and there are people in the U.S. here that are trying to do very similar things. This Congress has not been the best, let me put it that way. So should you use that WeChat? Now, obviously, no. The next one is Facebook Messenger, also called Messenger by Meta, and it has close to 1 billion users. And again, they are watching you. They are spying on you. They are tracking what you do. WhatsApp, I use for one of my masterminds. The whole group is in on WhatsApp, and I'm okay with that. Nothing terribly private that I'm worried about there. There are things that are said or discussed that I'm not perhaps happy that they're privy to. But in reality, WhatsApp is pretty good. Now, you have to make sure that when you're using something like WhatsApp, that you have to turn on their privacy features for end-to-end security, because that's been a historical problem with WhatsApp. Yeah, they can have end-to-end encryption, but you have to turn it on. So what is end-to-end encryption, and why does it matter? Well, end-to-end encryption means if you're sending a message to someone or multiple someones, and they obviously have to have the same app that you do, and when it gets to the other side, they can decrypt it. So anyone in the middle will just see a whole bunch of encrypted data, which just it looks like trash. If it's encrypted properly, there's no real distinguishing portions to it, if you will, or identifying factors that it's anything other than just random data. Really good encryption does that, right? It does an compression first and then messes with it. We're not going to get into how all of that works. I helped way back when to put PGP together. That's Phil Zimmerman's Pretty Good Privacy. I actually still use some of that stuff today. And then PGP became GPG, which is the GNU Privacy, GPG, and is well worth it as well. But that's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about regular messaging apps that regular people can use. I do use GPG, by the way. Those of you who email me at craigpeterson.com, if it's actually me responding to you, it will be a message that's cryptographically signed by GPG so that you can verify that it was me and it wasn't Mary or it wasn't Karen. So I do that on purpose as well. All right, I'm sorry, wandering around a little bit here. WhatsApp is pretty commonplace and is pretty good. Well, WhatsApp, as I mentioned, end-to-end encryption, but it's using the encryption from another project that's out there, and this is an open source project called Signal. If you want to be secure end-to-end, if you don't want to leave any digital exhaust around, use Signal. It's very, very good. What is his name? Moxie Marlinspike is the guy that founded it. He ran that company for quite a while. It's a foundation. And as I recall, early 2022, he stepped down as the head of that foundation, and other people have taken over. But he's even threatened to, and I assume he actually did, build in some things into Signal that will make some of these Israeli programs that are used to crack into cell phones, it'll make them fail. They'll crash because of bugs, and again, that's not what we're talking about right now. But Signal, again, if you're going to send a message, just like with WhatsApp, the other person, the receiver, has to have Signal on their device. Signal's available for smartphones, again, Android and iOS. You know what I feel about Android, which is don't use it. You're much better off, if you don't have much of a budget, buying an older model iPhone. They're going to be a lot safer for you. So Signal will also run on your Windows computer or your Mac. The same thing with WhatsApp, by the way. So WhatsApp, more common, not the worst thing in the world for privacy. Signal, less common, and definitely very good for privacy. Now, I mentioned Apple here. I use Macs, and I have ever since they switched over to Unix base. They actually put a Mach microkernel and FreeBSD userland and kernel on top of the Mach microkernel. So if you're a total geek, you know what I'm talking about. But it's designed to be safe and secure from the beginning, whereas with Windows and with Android, it was shoehorned in. The security, the privacy, right? It just wasn't there. So what should you do? Well, as I mentioned, you should be using Apple iOS devices. I'm not the world's Apple fan, okay? Don't get me wrong, but they are a lot more secure, and the Macs are also very secure. Again, nothing's perfect. They have not been attacked as much as Windows computers because, of course, Windows is more common. But having worked in the kernel and the network stack on both Windows, the actual kernel, the actual source code of Windows, and Linux, and BSD, and System 5, so all of the major core Linux distributions over the decades, I can tell you that the Unix world is far, far more secure. Now, you don't have to worry about it. People look at it and say, well, what should I use? Well, if you're a geek, you should probably be using Linux. I do use Linux, but I will admit my main workstation is a 10-year-old Mac Pro. 10 years old. How long do your Windows machines last, right? And it's still working great for me. Very fast still. It's a great little machine. And we still have Mac laptops that are 20 years old. So they are designed and made to last. Same thing with the phones. But they can be more expensive. So look at refurbed. Look at older models because it will save you money. You can be in the same price range as Windows. You can be in the same price range as Android. And you can have much, much better privacy and security. We're going to talk about electric vehicles right now and what the Wall Street Journal is calling the upside down logic of electric SUVs. And you know what? I agree with them here. But where are electric vehicles today and where are they going? Electric vehicles are an interesting topic because in reality, we're not ready for them. Our grid is not set up to handle electric vehicles. We are crazy what we're doing right now, shutting down power plants. Germany is bringing nuclear plants that they had shut down back online. They're not fools. Nuclear is the cleanest right now source that we can possibly get. Don't fool yourselves by listening to people that tell you that, for instance, the solar cells you put on your roof are green, because they are not. Highly toxic. The manufacturing, distribution, and disposal of those things. California, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, has a huge problem now because 90% of those solar panels on people's roofs are ending up in landfills and are leaking toxic metals into what little underground water supply California still has left. And that's not just true of California, that's everywhere. So we're depending on more electricity when we actually have less electricity. We're shutting things down. Look at Texas, right? We're trying to be green. People complain about Texas being conservative. It's not. It's just very independent. They have their own electric grid. The only state in the nation that has its own electric grid that's not tied in to anybody else. The whole rest of the country is composed of two grids. So if one state isn't producing quite enough, they can potentially buy it from another one. Here in the Northeast, we bring some of the power down from Hydro-Québec, là-bas, le nord, over there in the north, right? From the LG projects that they have up there. Of course, it's from hydroelectric dams. But we exchange it all. We move it back and forth. But we're shutting down some of these relatively clean sources of energy, even coal now with all of the scrubbers and stuff. But if you look at nuclear, particularly the new nuclear, it is as safe, it's far safer than burning natural gas that so many grids burn. Look in New Hampshire, doubled the cost of electricity in New Hampshire, because we didn't bring on the second nuclear reactor in Seabrook, right? And we're burning natural gas to generate most of our electricity. It doubled. It's absolutely crazy. The cost, the things that are happening in Washington and locally, like in New Hampshire, like in Texas, like in so many other states, are making our lives much worse. And to top it all off, now they're pushing electric vehicles, which again are not green. They are not safe. They are hazardous to the environment in so many ways, but particularly by their manufacturing. So if consumers and businesses really cared about the carbon dioxide that they're emitting, right, that greenhouse gas that's, just absolutely terrible, they might buy what? What's selling right now? Let me look. Oh, yeah. EVs, electric vehicles like Ford Mustangs, Mach-E, Hummers. EV, that's from GM. The wonderful new electric pickup from Ford. Now, these are huge vehicles. They are long-range electric vehicles, which is what we want, right? And they can be driven tens of thousands of miles before they rack up enough miles and save enough gasoline to compensate for the emissions created just to produce their batteries. And that's according to their fans. And when we're talking about the fans, their predictions, their estimates, their statistics typically are what? A little tainted, right? We talked about that earlier. Yeah. So it gets to be a problem, doesn't it? It gets to be a real problem. So what are they doing? Instead of making the small electric vehicles like the Nissan Leaf, which was a great little car. I've told the story of my neighbor who has the Leafs. He has a couple of them, and he installed a bunch of solar panels, and he uses those to charge his Leafs and to run around, because most of what driving he does, most of the driving I do, most of the driving most people do is just short range, right? It's less than 30 miles. So he loves it, right? But he's not doing it because it's green. He realizes that it harms the environment to have those solar cells, and it harms the environment to drive those electric cars that were very harmful to be made. The batteries right now from these electric cars, the outtakes, they are storing just like nuclear waste, although there's far more of it than there is the nuclear waste. A separate topic entirely, really. I guess there isn't a whole lot of correlation there, but they're not able to recycle so many of these batteries. We just don't have the technology for it. So why would you make these big electric vehicles, these sports utility vehicles, these trucks that have the long ranges, and not something that's nice and small? Think European, right? Think of the stupid car the smart car from Mercedes, that little tiny car. That works great in European cities where you don't have a lot of space to park. The roads aren't very wide. You can kind of zoom around, zip in and out, find parking, and you're not going fast, not going far. Makes sense, right? Same thing with like a Prius with the smaller engines. And yet you see people whipping down the highway, passing me, doing the exact opposite thing that you'd think they'd want to do. You're driving a small car with a small engine. Maybe it's a hybrid, electric gas. Maybe it's a plug-in hybrid. To do what? To stop CO2, supposedly to save the environment. And yet, at the exact same time, you are causing more harm than you need to the environment by zooming down the highway. That's not what these things are made for, not what they're designed for. But that is what most people could use, and yet GM, Ford, Chrysler, none of them are making the vehicles that fit into that part of the marketplace. The other nice thing about the smaller vehicles is they don't require as long to charge, because they don't have to charge up these big battery packs, because you're not going that far. So it's less of a demand potentially on the grid. Because again, even if you drive that big electric SUV 30 miles, you're hauling around 1,000 pounds, maybe more, of batteries that you don't actually need to haul around. See, again, it goes back to how so many of us are looking at this stuff, just like the original Prius poll that I've talked about so many times, where the number one reason people said that they drove a Prius, this was some 70% of the people, was because of what they thought, the purchaser of the Prius thought other people would think about them. This is a real problem. You know, the assumption that an electric vehicle stops oil from coming out of the ground, stops natural gas from coming out of the ground, stops coal from being mined, that assumption is problematic because it is not true. And when it comes to the carbon footprint, again, obviously, the environment is changing, the temperatures are changing. It's obvious, right? Climate denier, some might call me. But it's obvious the climate's changing. It has always been changing. Mount St. Helens eruption put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than mankind has since the beginning of time. So look at these volcanic eruptions and say, oh, okay, so we've barely scratched the surface as humankind. Far less than 1% of global warming is actually caused by humans. But it's about control. But this isn't a political show. Okay, I guess I am. So let's talk about the next article I had in my newsletter that came out this week. Again, Tuesday or Wednesday. You can sign up for it. It's absolutely free. This is my free newsletter at craigpeterson.com, or just send me an email, me@craigpeterson.com, and ask to be signed up. But it looks like President Biden is maybe thinking about going nuclear. I talked about this on the air earlier this week because there's a couple of really interesting things happening. One is the federal government has authorized some of these new nuclear technologies to go online. So they've got these different plants. There's a number of different types of plants that are out there and different technologies, but all of them hyper safe. And they are actually in small production. Pretty darn cool. The second thing, which I found particularly interesting, is that at least 3 times over the last few weeks, President Biden has talked about nuclear power, just in passing, right? I think he's trying to get his base to get used to the idea, because he's been trying to eliminate all forms of energy consumption, but he does seem to maybe favor development of nuclear power, or whoever is writing his speeches for him. You know, nuclear is carbon friendly, very carbon friendly, friendlier than windmills or solar parks, and it's a lot more reliable. So I'm happy about that. New plants coming online, just small ones. And that, frankly, is the future of nuclear, not these huge plants. And he's talking about it. So we'll see. It's absolutely green. Even, as I mentioned, Germany is bringing nuclear plants back online. And the European Union has declared that nuclear is green technology. And I'm shocked here because apparently I'm agreeing with the European Parliament. Oh, wow. What's going on? Hey, visit me online, craigpeterson.com. Make sure you get my insider show notes and the trainings that come out, craigpeterson.com.